Welcome to the Camp Owners Podcast. On today's show, we talk about how registration has gone this year as we ramp up for the summer of 2022. And we ask the question, should we start thinking about 2023? And who better to have on the show than Eric Wittenberg to talk a little bit about trends in registration, what we can do to get people off the wait lists and registered for 2023, thoughts on pricing, and how do we market to staff, which for all of us has been a real challenge. And one of the things we've all focused on as we prepare for the summer of 2022. Welcome to the Camp Owners Podcast. Welcome to the Camp Owners Podcast, a space for camp owners to talk about the unique aspects of camp ownership and get inspired by each other. We are going to sit down with camp industry experts, leaders, and fellow camp owners to hear how the camp dream transpired for them, learn from each other, and discuss some of the biggest issues in the private camp industry. Hi, everybody. My name is Howie Grossinger. I am the co-owner and director of Camp Robin Hood, a day camp in the suburbs of Toronto, and I am also the co-owner of Camp Walden, Canada, located about 3 hours north of the CN Tower in downtown Toronto.
Oh, look at that little geography right in that introduction,
Try
Howie.
that.
Wow. I am Kelly Shuna, the executive director and co-owner of Hidden Pines Ranch Day Camp, located in Stillwater, Minnesota, just 10 minutes from the St. Croix River. If you don't, just so you know where we're coming from, if you are looking to find and subscribe to the Camp Owners Podcast, you can either find us online at gocamp.pro/ownerspod or by searching for us in your favorite podcast app. Finally, if you're listening to this and think it would be useful to other camp owners or aspiring camp owners in your circle, please feel free to send them a note to listen.
Well, you know we're coming to the end of season 3 pretty much when we're ad-libbing with geography references, just so people can get their bearings. It's pretty awesome. This show would not be possible without two amazing sponsors, and we are happy to share the first one with you. Camptivities is a camp activity scheduler that you can do from the confines of your desk, but at the end of the day, the time put into this program will allow you to be out with your kids and your staff so much more. So if you're looking for ways to enhance rainy day scheduling, group scheduling, staff scheduling, how to make sure that everybody gets to the activities you want them to get over the course of your day, your session, your summer, please check out Camptivities. They are awesome. And our friend Ryan Rosen and his team are ready to chat with you if you're looking to explore a new way to get you out of the office and into camp. Let Camptivities help you get away from your desk. As I said, the team at Camptivities would love to show you the next big thing in camp. Visit camptivities.com to set up a time to chat. Kelly, so happy to be back. We are now literally calendar-wise in the throes of staff training and prep and putting the final touches on our facilities and welcoming groups and campers very, very shortly. So we thought that today's guest could have us not only thinking about what we've done over the course of the year, but also maybe how to think about what's ahead in terms of next summer. So we've heard from many camp owners that camp registration is going really well, and many of us have had wait lists for many months. What do we do with those wait lists? If we can't get them in this summer, do they just sit there? Is it too early to have them think about, or dare we say, hold a spot for 2023? Does anybody want to think about that? Can we even afford to start thinking about 2023 registration when the 2022 season hasn't even started? Well, we think we have the person to talk about all of this and more. We are happy to welcome back. This is a return guest, Kelly. This is, we're big time, and we've got some really high quality people who can come back and share so much good stuff. We've got Eric Wittenberg coming back to the Camp Owners Podcast. Eric is the CEO of Camper Machine, a marketing agency that helps camp operators with camper recruitment and sophisticated approaches to automated marketing and targeted communication strategies. Eric has grown up at camp, directed camps, started camps, and has become a valued resource in helping camp owners market their message to existing and potential camp families. Eric, welcome back to the Camp Owners Podcast.
Wow, that is the most impressive start to a show. I think of anything talking about camp futures, you've got a career in like at least radio. I don't know about TV, but
Well,
uh,
I appreciate that, Eric, and that's why no one watches these on YouTube, which is great. But if Jeopardy is looking for a new host, I'd love to audition.
oh, gosh, uh, I definitely am excited to be here, excited for the topic, excited to hang with you both and our friends who'll listen later.
Yeah, for sure. Eric, when I did give a brief introduction to sort of your journey in camping, but it's very extensive. I know it's been a lifelong experience for you, but maybe for those who have not met you before on our airwaves, maybe just a quick sort of introduction of where you've been and what you've done and all that good stuff.
Sure, sure. So this is the challenge of being audio, not visual. Normally, I flash logos here. It's like I grew up here, went there, started this. But I'm from White Plains, New York originally, and I grew up. I was like the one of the director's kids at a private day camp that my mom was the director of, Elmwood Day Camp. And so from 2 years old and eating cereal, underneath in the office floor, all the way to having athletic director jobs, teaching people how to drive buses and doing the whole CDL camp starts on the bus thing, which we definitely learned from some Robin Hood. There's some Robin Hood inspiration there. It's part of our kind of shared lineage. So I really grew up in a day camp place where I didn't realize that I was becoming the uber generalist. I just liked to play basketball and softball and throw pots, and like that's just what you do. Um, but then after I was kind of uh, I wouldn't say not inspired, but there was kind of like there wasn't much to do with the camp that's been mature and was full. It's only 6.5 acres, so there wasn't much to grow. I helped Sam and Alicia Borick take over Candy Mountain Day Camp in Rockland County, New York. It turned into Woodmont. So I had this day camp legacy, day camp kind of takeover. And then I went back to school for educational sports psychology because I kind of was like, oh, I need to go do something totally not camping, which is, so I went to Colorado and studied youth development through sport with this kind of psychosocial lens. And I started a CrossFit gym in San Francisco in 2009. And then Dan Zenkel, who had previously started a camp group and was kind of moving on to different things, found my wife and I, and we started the Berkshire Soccer Academy for Girls, which is an overnight girls only specialty camp where we mash up university soccer fields and coaching with the traditional camp environment, bunks and all the fun stuff. And so we get the real camp environment in 5 days where girls are like crying at the end, like, oh my gosh, I just like you. I love you so much. And so we really do it in 5 days.
Yeah.
But after having 3 kids and living in San Diego and moving to the woods for 4 months in the Berkshires for 8 or 9 years, my wife and I were like, okay, we need to change. And that's when I started Camper Machine. And I've had the kind of honor and privilege of helping, more than 20 camps in different capacities as they are bought and revitalized, started from scratch, or been around for 100 years and on the fourth owner of the same family, or not the same family, kind of looking to modernize the infrastructure and upskill. So I've definitely had a lot of diverse experiences, mostly in private camping, although I've had some other nonprofit experiences, but as far as kind of the range and on the East Coast and West Coast, which is nice. We have some shared friends, I think, across from Wake to Tri-State.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's my kind of camp spiel. And I think the only other thing that's probably relevant is like I was, as the camp director's kid, like a staff kid, I was also that kid that just kind of like showed up to Tri-State back when Tri-State was in Manhattan. And so that was always, I know we missed each other. You couldn't make it down or this year, Howie, but that was always one of the things where I was kind of confused by certain people seemed to like geek out so hard on everything, whether it was Michael Brandwine thing or, just talking to friends, and certain people were just kind of like there to pass the time. And so this is one of the things that I was kind of like, I am never going to not be interested in whatever's coming next.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So anyway.
Yeah, I'm a geek out. That's what
Yeah.
I would. I'm a for
Yes.
sure geeker outer.
Yes.
Absolutely. You could sell those shirts. Like
Yeah.
Totally, you could.
I
Camp
like it.
campgeeks.com. Get them now. GoPro.com or camp.
There you go. There you go. There you go. Yeah, I can't get enough. And I love hearing your story. You have so much great and vast experience. It's so interesting. So Eric, since you're not just looking for the next host of Jeopardy and Howie, but also talking to us.
Oh,
I
I know
just
what
in
this is going to
case
be like. This show's going to be like.
I know, just in case Howie does need a different job for 2023, but let's just talk about marketing for 2023. Um, well, first we have to talk about 2022. So I love your hot take on registration trends in 2022 right now. Like, what are you seeing? What do you think camps are experiencing across the country?
Uh, Camps across the country is tough, but I'll lop them up real quick into quarters, if not thirds. I think there's the the hard camps to hear about are the camps that are like griping about finding staff because they've been full since November or December, and there definitely are those camps that going into the pandemic and through their communication during the pandemic they were crystal clear and kept people happy. So they were kind of like what was hot, who was hot got hotter. I think if you were clear, you kind of rose to the top. And so those people have a totally different set of challenges with everything else, like we've mentioned, talking about finding the right enough staff to actually fulfill on all those promises. And then other 2023 fun puzzles to solve. And then there's the group in the middle that were like on the uptick, perhaps, and they're not sold out because they were in this growth phase, and they're actually experiencing a bit of a tailwind from all the camps that are full. There's definitely a couple of camps that I work with that I would love to say it was some of my brilliant ideas that helped them out, but I just think that were in the right place and they had some momentum with their culture and their communication, their staff and leadership. And then some of their competitors are full. So I mean, we can't actually take credit for that, but certainly we can take credit for being in the position to receive it. And there's probably another third of camps who were struggling and probably are struggling. Maybe that's because there were factors, out of their control with facility, board stuff, or whoever. But there's definitely some camps that are seeing this wave coming, and they're like, I want to be in front of that. And so, like each one of these groups has their own set of obstacles for sure. So that's my snapshot across. If I had to break it up across the country and across types of camps, I think those three segments exist in different proportions.
We're also seeing this reality of, and there's probably another segment because I know that up here in Ontario, there were still camps in 2021 that did not operate, and the last time they delivered their program, and some are incredibly well established camps for a variety of reasons, weren't able to make a go of it even in 2021. So some are now trying to come back after 2 years now, 2 summers, and therein lies the challenge of not only getting the staff to try to come back after their last experience being 2019 and probably asking, will it ever be the same again, blah, blah, blah. But some of those campers, out of just circumstance, maybe went to another camp in 2021 and weren't prepared to make the leap back because they found their groove and their circle at this new camp. So there is this segment that I know, and there may be listeners listening now who may be in that boat too and have had another set of marketing challenges to get back, no matter what incentives and very generous approaches they made to keep those families. It's been a challenge and it's a struggle. I don't know if you have a comment on any of that or you work with any camps that have been in that boat, but I know that's also a reality that some are feeling the pinch right now too.
Yeah, I haven't personally worked with anyone that has skipped both years, but certainly the camps I worked with that, everybody skipped one, most people skipped one, not
Yeah.
everybody, but uh, the challenges that I think I wouldn't say they get underestimated, but I think they have uh, an obscured impact is the loss of senior staff and returning kids on the instant creation of culture.
Right.
And so this has been a topic, I think we might have spoken about this at some point in Howie, previously, but if you had somebody that signed up for 2020 for their first year, but they didn't come, and then for maybe last year they deferred because it wasn't the right time, and now they're coming, they technically have been in your orbit for almost 3 years, but they know nothing about your grounds. They know nothing about like all the goofy things that Kelly says at the morning meetings, where she's going to say something about like, welcome to Stillwater, or whatever happens at your camp that's unique and special. They have no idea, but they feel like they should. And so that puzzle is surely something that you can only address beforehand or
Yeah,
on that first day.
for sure. And it also from a camper family recruitment, families that deferred, in 2020 may have decided not to take the leap, but still kept, maybe if you allow them to keep some funds with you, and now say, 2022, I'm in. This whole notion of communicating to a new family takes on a new kind of life, because are you talking to a new family who was ready to go into 2020 and now coming in 2022? So I think it's all part of this murky soup of trying to get your communication straight for these subsets of audiences within, as you say, your orbit for what they can expect in 2022. And I think a lot of us, and I've read some great stuff over the course of the year, and I know that Kelly talk about eating everything up. Like, she'll go to conferences, and she's gone to quite a few. She'll say, Howie, I got to tell you about this. This is the most brilliant thing. And a lot of it has to do with like just communication styles. Like, I didn't even think of that I can talk to just these people alone, and then I can talk to those people alone. And I know that in some ways speaks to your language, Eric, because some of the stuff Camper Machine is so good at is that segmentation and being able to do that, and not getting into that maybe so deeply. But the fact is that we have to recognize that more than ever, we're speaking the same language to we have to direct our language to very different audiences within our same community.
Uh, you're nailing this is a very specific issue that all these people that have had a 1 or 2 year absence from delivering program, they're all dealing with. And like what we actually did I'll speak for the Berkshire Soccer Academy, I can speak about that freely. We had to create a new tier of our segmentation. So my principle of segmenting your audience is like fundamental. The principles of segmentation, where we have this audience that's not a returner that is hot or a returner that's cold, but a returner that's been won and told they couldn't come to camp, and now they're in this win back category. So for the Berkshire Soccer Academy, we had this new segment of campers that probably still exist for most camps, that even after taking 2020 off and maybe buying for the first time, they didn't experience it last year. And so they're in this win back category for the first time, even though they're there. And I think you have the same thing. You just have to treat it like it's new, even if you've been around for 100 years. If everybody skipped 1 or 2 years, you have to pretend everyone's starting fresh. And so I think one of the traps that the subset of camps has is, it's not going to be the same. So don't say it's going to be the same. It'll be similar. It's not going to be hopefully you didn't change your program so much that you've alienated your audience, but creating the openness to it being different and new for everyone, I think is a communication challenge, a programming challenge. And for some people, it's a business operations kind of like structure challenge. Like, some people change their programs. I know more than one person on one camp that went to a longer session or a shorter session.
Right.
And so this idea of things starting anew, I think, is a hard thing to instill into one person, let alone a team that's running a lone camp, let alone, hundreds of camp people.
Mm-hmm. It's a hard thing, but like yesterday I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about, it's also an opportunity. Like it's an opportunity to not let slip away, because things can be different. So if things weren't great before, it's an opportunity to change that, or establish a new norm in your culture, or do some kind of those things that you want to do, or keep or lose. So I think it's hard. Change is hard, but I also think it's an opportunity for all camps really. But it's a challenge also to see it as that.
Totally. I mean, a guy I listened to, well, you're a learner, so you would be totally just drawn to that, Kelly. You'd be like, that's like magnetic to you. But there's early on in the pandemic, one of the guys that I was talking to in a group to kind of like, how are we going to deal with this? The phrase that we kept thinking about was, well, what if this is all working out for good? And then what you would have to tell yourself then is what's good is bad and what's bad is good. And it just kind of puts on this totally, you just flip the glasses. And so I think about if I was the fourth generation owner of 100-year-old camp, or someone that's just executive director of a 100-year-old operation, thank God for the pandemic, because I would never have been able to turn this parking lot into a field and get this funded or do all these things. So anyways, I think there's a lot of value in being able to flip your perspective with that as you look at the future. Even still, we're not past it, So.
Well, we're not past it, and I always, we've talked about a lot of this with Kelly and myself, and I know in my conversations with you over this period of time, is just the silver linings, right? The things we've discovered that have been sort of these light bulb moments of why didn't we do it this way? And as it relates to marketing, or the way we do outreach, and where we invested money in maybe some more digital marketing, or we went with social media a little more than we did before, and how we do our reach to not only attract families that are familiar with us, but we have an opportunity to spread the good word of the camp experience, and how are we reaching people. I think all of these things, I'd like to think, and I'm pretty confident that the industry as a whole has embraced a lot of this stuff. We've just recently had conversations on the show about how to meet Gen Z, where they're at, because they make up now a majority of our campers and most of our staff. Like, it's all about us adapting. And I know personally, and in conversations I've had with so many colleagues, that there are so many things we put in place last year that we would never have thought of doing, because we get in these streaks, I'll call them ruts, whatever it is, but we seized opportunities. And so from a marketing perspective, like, in terms of acquisition and getting people back on your train very quickly, after the season's over, like, I want to jump into wait lists in just a moment, but I definitely want to talk about sort of this idea from a marketing perspective, what you're seeing people are either doing differently, or what you recommend that people start considering.
Well, I think that's pretty open, right? So as far as kind of keeping the momentum going without talking about 2023, I think the biggest thing to think about that everybody could do would be, simply put, mapping out the different communication segments that you really need to keep in touch with. Mm-hmm. And this is something that I do. You've seen the communication spreadsheet, but for anybody that doesn't have this, and I didn't have this I never had it at Elmwood, never had it at Woodmont, never had it at Berkshire Soccer. We were running on, we were on Campminder, and they still are. And so the emails that we had sent in the year prior through the system, that was like our communication calendar, because we didn't have it. Like that's how most people probably are. And it's just really tough to conceptualize and make it really concrete, the different audiences, without naming it. There's this is my my wife's term that she definitely took from some psychologist person. Name it to tame it. It's like, so you got these wild beasts that you're afraid of, whether it be customers or anything. You just got to name it, whether it's an emotion or a group of people. You have to name the set so you can tame it. And so as it relates to going into the summer, especially as there is demand, there are waitlist people who are not enrolled in any sessions. Name that list, define how you find it in your database, whether it's a spreadsheet, a napkin, or Camp Brain, and pick the 3 things that you're going to send them that you know you're going to have like a week 2 highlight video that you're going to share with the people. Send it to them and say, we miss you. Wish you could have been here this summer. We'll be in touch in August about next year. So just kind of building these little treasures that you can dig up later. It really,
Yeah.
and I'm not, I think I've confessed this to you in the past, Hallie. I don't know, Kelly, I don't know if I've shared this openly, but like, I am so not a hyper organized, anal retentive thinker. Like, I wish I was. I so wish I was. Who's the gosh, I'm blanking on her name. Diana Bloom.
Yeah,
She's
yeah,
like
yeah, Diana,
like
yes.
I so wish I was Diana
Yes,
Bloom. I wish I had
exactly.
her brain. I have like the opposite. Uh, but so I was not born thinking, oh, organized, color coded, data validated spreadsheets that we can use to map out 18 months of communication. No, 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 no. This was totally learned because I needed it because I was so unorganized. And so you're either a 5-quarter camp mapping out September before you go into summer, or you're a 3-quarter camp because you wake up in September and you're like, what are we going to do this year? And you have 3/4 of the year left.
Yeah.
Uh,
Or you're what we've been at times over my time here saying, "Oh, it's November. Can anyone remember what email we sent this time last year?" Like I think we've all had those moments. I confess that for many years it was one of those. I get together with my team. I remember we reached out in November with something we needed to say to our families. Anyway, oh yeah, we go into the data. Oh yeah, we did searches in our our inbox to find
yeah,
out what we
yeah.
sent. And I'd like to think that I'm hoping I'm not the only one who did that, but my point is that this recommendation of mapping out the communication and the marketing to our subsets is so great. So I do really appreciate that. So you gave us a tidbit of a strategy for waitlist people, and I know, and I'm going to say with some confidence that and I'm hopeful that a large number of our listeners at this time in the spring have the good situation of waitlists. I really hope that's the case, and I have a gut feeling there's a good number of people who are in that position. We just can't get them in, and sometimes we don't even know if they've gone somewhere else and they're just sitting on our wait list. And you know I've been around Eric long enough to know that he talks about low hanging fruit and different things and different ways to communicate. But I think for people who are listening, maybe one of those good tips could be an extension of what you just said about trying to figure out what we want to do with those people on the wait list, mid spring of 2022.
Yeah, I mean, what I would, well, the tip that's most self-serving to your kind of mention of low-hanging fruit is like the tip for a camp and on a sales perspective is to keep them warm by giving something of value, even if it's a pulse check. you know like for a lot of, this is similar to when people enroll for the first time in the fall, and the excited camera director is like, great, they'll get the automatic transactional email, and then you ghost them for 3 months after you worked so hard to get them there. We kind of do the same thing to waitlist people. And so you worked really hard to get them to enroll, through all the marketing. You paid for the public listings, you donated the sessions to your kids' local high schools and or middle schools or whatever it is. And now that you got them on the wait list, don't leave them out to dry. And so giving something of value, even if it's, how to be a guide to being on the wait list, don't call us, we'll call you. Here's like 4 tips to let you know, like, and publish the date you're going to update them next. And this is the principle at play, is that trust builds, promise building builds trust. Promise keeping builds trust. Sorry. So if you say, we'll email you on June 1 with our updates for, June and July, and then you do it, you've actually advanced the relationship, even if you've told them nothing new. Like, you're still on the wait list, but you did what you said you were going to do. And so that's probably more than the other camps that they're on the wait list for.
Mm-hmm.
And
I like
so
that. I like that.
It's just being a promise keeper to build the trust for whatever comes next.
I think that's so valid I mean, because I'm one of those people that we've been lucky enough to have a wait list for a couple of years, and they just sit there until December. And I first email our returning families, like, here's the dates, because we don't open registration until the end of January. But for returning families, here's the dates and pricing and yeah. And then I email the wait list, but the wait list literally just sits there from February until November. So you are speaking to
Okay.
me.
We have to rewind the tape.
Why?
I'm sorry. I thought that you said, not really. We can keep recording, but I thought that you said you don't open enrollment until the end of January.
I don't. That you can keep the tape rolling. This is true. Do you feel like we need to do a consultation? Are you disappointed in me,
This
Eric?
is actually an intervention, Kelly. Um, your friends and family, would you bring them out? Bring them out. Your alumni families are here to confront you on this.
Oh, Eric, I've never had an intervention live on a podcast. I think I'm getting a little sweaty. My Carhartt hat, because it's cold in Minnesota, might have to come off. Let me give it a little air. Okay. All right. I'm ready. I'm ready.
It's okay. It's okay. We can defer. I don't want to create. I'll back off. I'll give you space. That's fine. We can talk about it later. But so yes, you've had wait list people, and you basically have a wait list from August to January, but we won't even talk about that because the people that are like waiting to get in. But this concept of wait list, it has a corollary. I just want to be remiss if I didn't add this. The corollary is the default assumption is that people are just sitting on the wait list like suitors, like begging to go on a date with you. And it couldn't be farther from the truth. And so what usually ends up happening is, you think you have this wait list of 400 people, and by the time you need them and it gets the right session and the right grade and the right week or whatever, all this stuff, and it's like, no, you really don't have that much, and they cooled off real quick when you didn't get back to them. And so your wait list of 400 people is like, maybe you have two. And so the corollary to, give them some value and give them trust is, don't treat them like they're an endless supply of money or heads. Or so I love the question, like the wait list, kind of calling the wait list is like the correlate to that is like, are you still looking? Like I'm like, you're on the wait list. I got a spot for you. Are you still looking? And then you can get a more accurate list maintenance. And it's a little bit of work, right? But I would rather deal with that work when I have an administrator sending an email to the 40 people on the wait list that is for the session that is the least full, saying, are you still waiting for a session 2 spot? And if 20 of them back off and they say, no, I can room, and you at least know you're dealing with the reality of what you have. So it's kind of it's 2 tidbits. It's kind of a corollary there.
Yeah, no, and I think that's super helpful because, and we all know, the reality is that, the notion that we have people in the office who can address those 40 people on the wait list is challenging, especially at the time of year where our focus is on buying and getting supplies and training and school groups that might be coming to you before the campers start or whatever it might be. Having said that, I can only speak from experience, and full disclosure, Eric, I do work with Eric, and has opened, our eyes as an organization to some of these things that we've signed or opened up some people to do. And we pick times in the year where we can give the time to do those things. And we've felt that we've been more engaging and have kept people more interested in what we deliver for longer periods of time because we've done that. And it could be a random Thursday call from a member of my office team just saying, hello, my name is, Jordana, and I see you're on our wait list. Hey, what's the, what do you, would you consider a different session? Would you do this? And it's all good stuff. And I just think that it's one of the things that moving forward, all of us in the industry have to become more intentional about, I think we have to, we're riding quite a wave of people loving us and re-registering, and and we also have to give opportunities for perhaps even early registration for those that didn't join us but were ready to write us a check and didn't get in.
Yeah.
And are they loyal customers, or they are just loyal, interested people who, if we don't act, we're going to lose them? And so I just think, Kelly, as we try to get a little more sophisticated, generationally, people who've owned our camps previously or have been in the business a long time have never really thought of it. In the pandemic and the eagerness to fill our bunks and to bums in buses and all the things that we do, I think we need to start, being a little more salesy. As much as we don't want to be salesy, we have to start thinking about that if you're not doing it already. And I can just speak from my own experience of being more aware of it. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah. So that's funny. I want to, I really am hesitant to say this because I don't want this to feel like a commercial in any way at all. But I think people need to hear and see about something vivid and detail to understand it. Like the administrator that's reaching out to those 40 people, the way that would happen for Howie and Camp Robin Hood would be an email saying, with a picture of a thumbs up and a thumbs down, saying, click which one are you still interested in on the wait list. Like I'm not saying, and I think you really want to set yourself up to deal with that in April, not having somebody withdraw in June and then having to call, like you think that's bad for Patty. Well, shout out to Patty, Camp Administrator Hall of Fame at Robin Hood there. But you think it'd be bad for Patty to have to deal with wait lists and withdrawals now, but June would be way worse. Anyways, but so that's just kind of before we kind of button up and move on. This sort of new thinking and new waves to create new things that you're talking about, Howie. It's really exciting because it's the most new thing in camping for me in my whole life.
Right.
Like you just described, like I kind of moved away from the camp that I grew up at because I felt like it was totally developed and all you could do is like run it into the rocks pretty much. It was like, it was full and it had been around forever. So the idea that you can create this demand of a wait list and a full season, and that your program or any program has this reputation where people want to sign up 16 months in advance, 18 months in advance, or would pay a deposit to be the first person after the enrolled families, and however it plays out. That's just so exciting as a way to create the thing that I think every camp director wants, which is like a stress-free and winter of recruitment. Like I think I've mentioned this to Howie, like Howie wants to go skiing and like be stressless in January, right? Because he knows camp is full. I think if you don't address the mental toll and the kind of seasonal cyclical nature of being a camp director and having this sort of micro sabbatical that you would get if you had a full camp or full-ish camp in the winter, because you capitalized on this wave now, I think it'd be a big missed opportunity. So speaking of how to do that.
Why are you looking at me, Eric? Keep going.
So the principle of segmentation, that we talked about earlier, if you kind of magnify that, not just from like leads and on the enrollment side, if you look at it in terms of like, let's just say there's 100 people on a wait list, there's 10 that are really waiting for you. And there's 20 that have moved on and registered somewhere else or 2 other places. And then there's a bunch that are kind of like already forgot about you and they don't even know you exist. And so finding out who those are is something that I think would be really valuable. And this is kind of why I was suggesting culling the wait list, because I would offer to those 10 people a special invitation. And this is no different than what you would do if those 10 people showed up to your office and they're like, I'm dying to get my kid in this year. You would be nice to them. There's no camp director to be like, okay, give me your number. I'll call you as soon as we open. Or you would just be loving towards them. You'd like take good care of them. And so this is just a different version of that. Marketing is just that sales conversation that's one way to more than one person. And so you're saying it to the 10 or 20 that are opening your emails regularly, that if they want, they can click here, pay $10, pay $100 to get the first spot, either after the currently enrolled kids or with them, but before it goes to the general public, so that they can avoid. And I think that would probably feel too salesy, is how he was saying, like we have to call it camper recruitment because it's all about our program, which I think is like kind of a self-centered way to look at the world. But
Yeah.
And if you actually flip it, think about the stress. If you're not a parent and you haven't looked for camps or schools for your kid, you're totally underestimating the distress of the whole value of like how the society will judge you for being a parent is put on like what your kids do and what they look like, and what they look like when you go out in public. And so if you could save a parent the stress of them having to find a camp by letting them sign up 16 or 18 months in advance, you've done them a service. And now you're like totally centering on helping them and not talking about your program as it's so prestigious.
Mm-hmm. Talk to me a little bit. I feel like we'd be remiss to not talk about it if we're talking about 2023, about inflation. Like, what's your thoughts on, I mean, that's a big word right now, especially here in the US of A.
Here too.
So
It's all over.
I mean, that's because as people, I think if you're encouraging camps right now to be thinking about 2023 already and planning for that, part of that is pricing and what that's going to look like and inflation. So what's your general thoughts on that?
100%. Kelly, I love that question. I love it because I'm sure there's some people that were listening like, I'm never going to publish a price 16 months in advance. And so the first thing is that everybody should be thinking about this before you publish dates and rates, right? Like everyone has to. But most people, like the behavioral economics side of things, there's probably a threshold that you can move your prices up, that you already have the boundaries of them already. Or like there's certain people that have in their belief, they have it locked in that they only raise by 100 or 150. So the first thing I would do is really establish what your current beliefs are about pricing as a kind of baseline. So this is like my steps, right? Think about what baseline you have, the beliefs, because I would call them beliefs. I've spoken to people like, we only go up 100 every year. And then I would look at the data of a couple of things before you go pricing, because pricing is just one piece of it. So the first thing I would do in terms of the data is find out what your net effective discount rate was for the year, because you're not just picking a price for your session, you're picking discounts and deadlines and promotions. And ultimately, if you have to raise the price 20%, but raise your discounts 15% as a way to hide it or make it feel better, you're playing the game. You're not doing a lockstep. Inflation is 8%, so I'm going to go 8%. That's void of critical thinking. It doesn't make any sense. And so what you want to do is, what are your current discounts? Who got them? Like what kind of early enrollment discount are you giving away? How much, you're going to cap it, at a certain point or a deadline to capitalize on the demand. And then you have to factor in how much more is stuff going to cost you. And if you're so sophisticated that you have, your margins and you actually know, what some people have that, most people probably don't. Most people are just kind of sorting it out at the end of the season. But you can adjust it and figure out where you need to be at the end of the day and then work backwards from there. Because that's, how I think we've spoken about this a little bit, but you want to make people feel like you're taking care of them, especially when there's a big price increase. And so I dealt with this last year with a specific camp that I'm thinking of, where they had all these complex, add-ons. And so then thinking about pricing for the year ahead, which I was pushing them to do, to open enrollment during the summer to price ahead, they just couldn't solve it. And so we shifted them to a fixed price that included everything and a discount if people sign up early. And people were so appreciative. They ended up paying like 10% more, but they were appreciative that it didn't burn calories for them to figure it out. And it was just clear. And so I think there's another perspective in the offer presentation
Mm-hmm.
is
Totally.
really an underweighted, an undervalued piece of quote unquote pricing. Um, so those are my kind of steps in thinking about inflation, but it's not going to go down. It's not going to disappear. So you might as well think about it. And the only other
Right.
thing that I'll add on that is that opening the season and registration for reservations doesn't necessarily mean that you need to publish your dates and rates. I mean, you need your dates, but like you could take a soft reservation and say we're going to publish the full calendar with dates and rates in October, not January 31st. Uh, sorry for the dig, um, but uh, but honestly, that's like another one of these sort of mental shifts in that if you have a deposit from people, the odds that they withdraw because they don't like your price increase and offer presentation is pretty low unless you did something really dramatic, or that you offended them in some way, or it felt like a bait and switch.
Mhm.
Yeah. I
I know it's a lot.
remember.
I'm sorry.
No, it's great because, I think the industry itself, and I can speak for myself, it's, every year, pre-pandemic, it's like we throw the dart at the dartboard sometimes and say, okay, I think we're going to go up 2.5% this year. And we don't really look at, well, did my transportation to and from camp go up this much? And, where did my capital expenses go? And I think we're all becoming, to use the word again, much more sophisticated. I mean, the pandemic forced us to take a much deeper dive into our financials, and we've had glad to say we've had an opportunity to have on the show some really smart people who have talked about cash flow and budgeting and looking forward. But this looking forward exercise on fees and pricing, I think, is something that I think is an exercise that I think the industry takes much more seriously, I think, is my sense. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't, I think the point you made about the pricing presentation, the way you communicate it, the way you make it look on your website or in the mailer you give out, I think goes a long way to either further confusing people if they're really getting the best rate, or is there something in fine print that I'm missing or whatever. So I think I know Kelly's a serial note taker, so I know she's writing all this stuff down. But I think that's really sage advice. So I think I've benefited from that advice over the last couple of years for sure.
Yeah, and the people aren't going to, the good news is that people aren't thinking about you as much as you think they are. So
Yeah.
like that might feel like bad news at first, right? Everybody, like I have this phrase, it's like a stick it of a presentation. I would love someday I'd love to like create and deliver. It's like, you're so self-centered, you're just like me.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and it's like all of the ways that we kind of turn into navel gazing people as an organization and an industry, I think sometimes it's like no one's got a spreadsheet of the prices of your deposits, sessions, pictures, water bottles. No one's tracking that.
No.
Nobody's, I mean, you probably not even you. It's like if you're not doing it, nobody's doing it. Um, so I think at the end of the day, we kind of carry with, well, I'm like, no one's going to know the percentage. No one's going to call you and say that they have a beef with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Totally. So we've talked about marketing trends for 2022. We've talked a little bit about obviously we've talked a lot about wait lists, and we're talking about pricing and obviously the realities of inflation. You've given some new language around hot leads and cold and stuff like that, and how we need to sometimes view people in these segments, which I think is so important. I'd like to turn our attention a little bit in this last few minutes that we have together about just some marketing thoughts around staffing, because
hmm.
we definitely have had conversations over the course of this season and last about the messaging about the camp experience, and you know, ACA does a fantastic job, and we've had, you know, Kim Acock and the work that, you know, they're doing over there, the ACA, etc. But when it comes to like marketing and strategies and things to be thinking about for, you know, getting new people to consider camp, you know, I just wanted to get some thoughts. Kelly and I are quite interested, before we close out the show.
Yeah. Well, so there's two things that I want to share, and I'm doing quick. The first thing is that as soon as you build the machine to influence and generate, you know, sales of campers, the first thing everybody, you know, that if you're awake and you really understand what's going on and thinking, the first thing that people think is, how can I do this for staff? So there obviously it changes. So you jump from Facebook for, you know, parents and Instagram for parents to TikTok for 19-year-olds, and your content, but the fundamental principle of tracking them and kind of creating this catch and a hook and nurturing them is totally the same. And kind of referencing the work that ACA has done to kind of, you know, the get a real job sort of like a correction. I think that alumni networks for people that have existed for at least more than 5 years is the kind of treasure that's buried in the backyard. You know, in terms of getting alumni connected and sharing, speaking about their audience. This is not necessarily groundbreaking news of any kind. This is, I think, it's probably been around for a long time, but rethinking of ways to engage alumni is something I think that is worth the fresh look.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know if I shared like that video ask tool. I think I showed you that, Howie.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a
So
good. Actually, that's a good resource. I'd love for you to just quickly sort of describe that that platform.
yeah, so I mean, I actually when we had to hire when we started Berkshire, we used this a tool very similar, and I loved it, but it had too many technical kind of barriers. But this tool is super slick. It's called videoask.com. It's owned by Typeform, so they're like a form company. So it's a technology tool, and they allow you to post a video on one half of the screen or a panel, and then have a response or potentially video recorded as part of the correspondence. There's one of them is on my website right now. It's on some of the tri-state sessions page, but you can go straight to videoask.com and you'll get it really quickly. But sending an alumni email saying of a video of, you know, Kelly saying, I hope you loved your time working in Minnesota. I'm sure that there was something that you learned along the way. Would you mind sharing what that is, if it still helps you now in your current job and wherever you do for now, whatever you do for work now, so that we can show it to other, you know, prospective staff members? That's totally different than trying to get them together at a pizza party once a year, which requires travel and a commitment. And like, oh my goodness, we're so pandemic over that. Let me do it for my pajamas. So that's what I would kind of throw that out there as a tool specifically to leverage and reunite and kind of recapitalize some of the alumni juice there.
For sure, but it's also a really really cool way to connect with Gen Z. We've talked a lot about that. You got to meet them where they're at, and if this is the TikTok generation or whatever we want to describe them at, and there's multiple ways of describing them, this is really cool stuff that you could be doing to explore. So videoask.com totally should be that, but they're not a sponsor of this show yet. No, they won't be, because we've got great sponsors.
Yes. You're right. They should be. They're not as cool as the sponsors. There's not as cool.
No, absolutely, and that makes me think about our original sponsor of the Camp Owners podcast, and I'm grateful to give them a shout out. Camp Brain. We've mentioned them a few times in our show. Camp Brain's been around since 1994 with 45 plus dedicated staff to meet your every need. One of the most wonderful aspects of being a Camp Brain user is their willingness to help. Their staff are always on the ready to help you solve a problem, figure out a report that you may need, and otherwise just be there to make your operation run as smoothly as possible. We are proudly, as my camps, an original Camp Brain user, and the evolution of Camp Brain has been incredible. So every aspect of camp operations that you are considering, please check them out. They've got something to offer every camp and every retreat center out there. So check them out at campbrain.com or call 866-485-8885. Eric, we've come to that point in the show where we talk a little bit about inspiration, something that you've been thinking about, a book you've read, a podcast, a quote, something that's been on your mind. I thought I would just ask you, is there a piece of information you'd love to share with the audience today?
Yeah, my new favorite book, because it's one I just finished, is Thinking in Bets. I'm not sure if you've heard of it, by Annie Duke. She's a professional poker player, turned speaker now. I think after a 20-year career, you might have seen her on the World Series of Poker. And
Yes,
the name might be locked up somewhere in your mental, in your records of when poker was on TV. So I just love her thesis of there is no yes and no. There are probabilities and skill and luck, and you have to figure out how they work
wow.
together.
I love that. I love that. That's a great one.
Yeah.
For me, this is this time of year where I'm always very hyper aware of culture and not just taking the culture we've created at camp for granted, but being very intentional about sharing it and talking about it and wanting people to contribute to it. And I'm starting to reread a book called The Culture Question: How to Create a Workplace Where People Like to Work. And if there's ever, we want our people at camp to like to come to work every day, whether it's day camp or wake up every morning in their bunk, with a lot of kids who are up way too early in the morning and still love what we do at overnight camp. Regardless, culture. And I encourage you to check out culture as well. I know that Kelly has some inspiration. And Kelly, what's your inspiration for today?
Thank you, Howie. My inspiration for this week is a book that a friend shared with me. It is something that I would really like to use in staff training. It's called Stress Less and Accomplish More, the 15-minute meditation program for extraordinary performance. So I've been thinking a lot about trying to incorporate mindful moments and meditation and so just some mental health strategies into my staff training this year. And so this book really gives some great attainable tips and strategies for incorporating mindfulness and meditation. And so I'm going to use this for my staff training. So Stress Less, Accomplish More by Emily Fletcher. And I will put a link in the show notes.
And that sounds great. Eric, we've come to the end of another show, another great episode with amazing insight, very timely. Thank you for all the contribution. If people want to get a hold of you, ask you a question, get to know the things you're doing, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
Sure. The website is campermachine.com, or people can just email me, Eric, ERIC, at campermachine.com.
Amazing. And if you want to get a hold of me, you can find me at Howie Grossinger on Twitter and Instagram, or at howie@camprobinhood.ca. Kelly, how can people get a hold of you?
If listeners would like to reach me and maybe sway me, like Eric talked about, to do my registration earlier than January, my email is Kelly with a Y at hiddenpinesranch.com.
And please don't forget that you can find all of our show notes at gocamp.pro/ownerspod. You can find the resources that we mentioned in this episode and lots of great stuff there, not only from our show, but all the other great Go Camp Pro podcasts. We hope you enjoyed this. Eric, Kelly, great to be with you again. Everybody, thank you so much and can't wait to see you again on the Camp Owners Podcast.